Hola, ¿cómo está? Yo tengo un café. I don't remember the mug. I don't remember the Spanish word for mug. Three, two, one. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Today is Thursday, October the 8th, 2020. My name is Jeremy, and this is my first cup of coffee. That is very warm, very tasty. Well, I don't know about you, but I had a whirlwind of a Wednesday. It was so busy. I had so much work going on. So just jump. You can make it. Just being goofy. Client stuff and driving and all this work and email, and I got a lot done. It was a great day. But I was so fried when I got home. I've got diabetes on both sides of my family, and I don't have diabetes, and I'm not pre-diabetic. I don't have that, but I have gotten close. And sometimes I wonder if my body processes insulin in quite the right way. I had an just yesterday between food timing, I didn't eat enough, and caffeine. By the time I got some real food in me, no, you're not climbing on me. For lunch, I was feeling a little off, and didn't get rid of that feeling. So, didn't go to the gym, went to bed early, and what did I make for dinner? Ah, boring food. But I feel a lot better now. So here I am with coffee and a cat and all of you. And we're talking about whatever we're talking about. Today's going to be an interesting day. We keep chipping away on a bunch of things on the back end. And, even though I don't talk about a lot of whistlekick stuff day to day, it doesn't mean it's not happening. It just means there isn't stuff that's worth talking about. Say, oh, I sent some emails with this person and that person and this other person, and we talked about the books, and we talked about this other thing. It's not really worth talking about, so we don't talk about it. But when there's big stuff, I talk about it. The major thing going on today is that I am preparing my defense for my lemon law hearing for the car. So I got to sit down and come up with everything that Mazda's going to say to try and blame it on me. Figure out what I'm going to say in response. Excuse me. There's a little bit less pressure because it's over Zoom. But whatever. Right? What else is going on? That's about it. That's about it. Current plan is that I will be traveling this weekend and there will be no show on Monday. I may make one and upload it. I am unsure yet. Depends on the timing. I'm going to try. So, if you wake up on Monday for Columbus Day / Indigenous Peoples Day, depending on where you live in the US, or if you live abroad and it's just a normal day, you may or may not see me. We'll find out. That's on my list to decide for today. I will let you know tomorrow morning. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. What else do you have to say? Should we switch to questions? See what they have to say? She's the worst co-host. She just sits there and purrs. Shouldn't say anything. No response. Hi. I think she's cute. You want to say hi? It's a cat. You need some of that. All right, one more sip of coffee and I'll get the tablet. See what you all wrote in. Remember, if you want to ask me something, you can just drop it in the comments below after the episode closes, and I respond tomorrow. That's how we do this. Oh, it's Thursday. Is there a show? Are they on YouTube again? Stacy says, morning, Zuza and Jeremy. Zuza, you can't, it doesn't work that way. You gotta lay down. Goober. We had an issue with the podcast host that YouTube was essentially blocking them for publishing. And so our episodes weren't landing on YouTube. But they fixed it, or so they said. So let's see. Yep. Oh, and it looks like they all came back. Yep. Episode 541, 542, and 543 are all up on YouTube now. Episode 543, Thoughts on Becoming a Better Instructor. And this was the debut episode with Andrew Adams, who is now part-time co-host for the Thursday episodes. And shout out to Andrew, and thank you. And looking forward to seeing what everybody thinks of those episodes. Always looking at what we can do different and hopefully improve on. So Andrew's going to obviously be on the air, but also help me pick the topics and add some different perspective because our experiences are different. And if it goes well, we'll start including him in other stuff. And Stacy's giving him a shout out. Could you settle? This is difficult to do with you moving around. You know? Lay down. All right. What do we got today? You're going to fall. It's not a place to sit. You're off. See? You're off. There's no couch there. Looks like we got stuff from Frank. Thanks, Frank. Thursday, October 8th, 2020 is International Podiatry Day. What are 3 things you wish more people understood about their feet? Your feet were designed or evolved, depending on how you look at it. Doesn't matter. To do a job. Shoes do not do the job better. If you track the development of shoes, specifically sneakers, you will see that as we have added cushioning and all this other fancy technology to shoes, we have also increased joint issues, ankle, knee, hip, and back. Why don't we have such a issue with wrists and ankles and shoulders? Because of shoes. So what do? Spend as much time barefoot as you can. If you're watching this, you're a martial artist. You're probably barefoot quite a bit. Is it something that you just suddenly go and do? No. It's something you work up to. Your feet, most feet, the average foot in modern society has atrophied and is actually swollen because it's being cooped up in a box all day, not doing anything. Now, fortunately, things are a lot easier now than they were 10, 15 years ago with this. I started down this rabbit hole in my mid to late 20s because I had knee problems and I couldn't walk. I couldn't walk downstairs. Fast forward now, I can run a 5K. I can hike depending on the terrain, 4 to 5 miles without issues. There are plenty of shoes now that are flatter, that have thinner soles. If you have knee issues or hip issues or back issues or ankle issues or foot issues, instead of trying to correct them with orthotics and crazy shoes, get to a point where you can walk barefoot. And I don't just mean walk around your house, I mean walk outside. We were doing that for a long time. I don't want cat hair on my coffee. That's what I wish people knew about feet. What's next? Have you ever been to a podiatrist? No. Never needed to. I don't know how to extend the answer on that question. Next. How familiar are you with plantar fasciitis? Mildly. I get it if I'm wearing the wrong shoes for too long. I'm sure there is a clinical definition of plantar fasciitis, and I'm sure, fairly certain that most of us probably use the term wrong. And just as, for a lot of people, any low back pain is sciatica, and it's really not. Plantar, underneath the foot, fasciitis, issues with the fascia, right? It's things not quite working properly. To me, anytime my feet or my knees have issues, it's a reminder I need to spend more time barefoot and get out there and walk and even run barefoot. And yeah, it's taken me years to get to the point where I can do that, but it's therapy. What keeps a joint healthy? Movement and pressure. Movement means full range of motion. Pressure means you're doing something to exert pressure on the joint. Standing does a little. What do we do with our knees most of the time? We're sitting. There's very little pressure going on there. Running, that exerts some pressure. Jump, spin kicks, there's some pressure when you land, but hopefully not too much. Otherwise, that's quite a lot of force. The irony here is that I love shoes. That when I really finally figured this out, I think I had 40 pairs of shoes in my closet. Sneakers, boots. I like shoes. I've always liked shoes. I'm not a sneakerhead. I was never like that. I was never one to dress, really creatively or colorfully. But shoes were the way that I felt like, oh, I can individualize with shoes. That I was comfortable with. And the day that I figured out what was going on and what I needed to do, I think I had to get rid of 30 pairs. And every pair that I kept was still not the right pair, but they were at least good enough at the time. I remember I had this beautiful pair of Doc Martens that I'd worn like 6 times. And that was the shoe that finally connected all the dots because it had a little bit more of a heel than I was used to. And within a dozen steps of wearing them, my knees would hurt. Because you think about it, if you wear shoes, most shoes, how do you walk? Heel, toe, heel, toe, heel, toe. How do you walk without it? We land midfoot. We step like this. We don't take as big of a step. And it completely changes the way the forces come up through the body. John says, I had a foot injury that I struggled with for 6 to 7 years. Since I started Taekwondo, my chronic pain went away within 2 to 3 months. Boom. Why would I guess that's happening? Because you're spending time barefoot. All I needed was to strengthen my foot through natural movements. Yeah. It's no coincidence that our foot has an arch. You know, anything about architecture or physics, an arch is incredibly strong. We have arches in our feet for a reason. It's a resilient design decision or evolution in the body. Right? Cats don't have arches in their feet. What else do I want to say about shoes and feet? There's another question, but I'm just thinking before I go on. Let's see what Frank has next. Does the no icing rule mentioned in Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio episode 309 with Gary Reinl include foot injuries? Yes. So if you haven't checked out that episode, it's one of the most controversial episodes we've ever done. Here's the gist. Ice is BS. Ice does not help anything. There are a couple different circumstances where ice is appropriate. And the irony is, I never liked icing. I always felt like something was wrong with it, but I was a kid and I didn't have the understanding to do it. As I got older, I said, there's something unnatural about this. There's no circumstance in nature where animals are icing things. The body's response to an injury is not to cool the area, it's to warm the area. So what's going on here? Here's when you ice. If you lose a limb and you're trying to restrict blood flow coming out the wound, or let's say I go hiking and really hurt myself, but I still need to move that body part. I sprained my ankle, but I have no way of immobilizing it and getting carried down. I still have to walk. That's when icing is okay. It's temporary. Because what does icing do? It restricts blood flow. It slows movement. It stagnates the waste byproducts in the injury so they don't move around. You can go check out episode 309. You can find Gary's book. The whole RICE, rest, ice, compression, elevation thing, it's basically bunk science that has been passed around for so long, everybody thinks it's true. There's no evidence for it whatsoever. And it was nice having Gary on the show because he was able to articulate it much better than I can. So does this apply to feet? Absolutely. If you have an injury and you want it to heal as quickly as possible, do not use ice, do not use anti-inflammatories. You can use them for pain if you have to, but inflammation is part of the body's healing process. Ice suppresses inflammation. An anti-inflammatory suppresses inflammation. So if the body needs to do a certain amount of work via inflammation to heal an injury, anytime you're icing or using ibuprofen or anything like that, what is it doing? It's slowing down the healing process. This is part of why when I get hurt, I'm back on my feet so much faster than most people. People look at me, you're 41. How do you bounce back so fast? I let my body do what it wants to do. There are plenty of people out there plenty of high-level coaches. In fact, the one that I find the most interesting is a weightlifting coach named Louis Simmons. I got some comments coming in here, I think from John, and I'll read them in a moment. Louis Simmons is a powerlifting coach at a gym called Westside Barbell, and there's actually a documentary on Netflix called Westside versus the World. It's really interesting. Louis is a really fascinating guy. He has been responsible for a lot of advancement and a lot of world records in powerlifting. But let's say you are at Louis' gym and you're bench pressing. Everybody knows what a bench press looks like. You're laying down, pushing weight, and you tear your pec or your bicep or something. 24 hours later, you will be repeating that movement with a broom, as little weight as possible. which is completely counter to what most doctors will do. What do most doctors do? They're going to immobilize it. What happens when it's immobilized? Any of the waste byproduct from the body trying to heal the injury stays stagnant, because how does that move? A lot of the times, if it's a joint or a ligament thing, it's through motion. You've got to move it. Why do doctors do that then? To prevent you from being dumb and hurting yourself more and suing them. A huge part of our modern medical system is based on litigation. The goal of the hospital is not to heal you as quickly as possible. It's to keep you from hurting yourself more. Actually, to keep you from suing them, 1, and to keep you from hurting yourself more, 2. 3 is actually healing the injury. John says, I almost had surgery on my foot about 7 years ago. I'm glad I didn't. My issue is completely gone now. I can even run again now. Awesome. It follows up, I've never liked icing injuries either. I've never liked using NSAIDs for injuries either. Doesn't make sense to me to inhibit your body's natural healing process. Exactly. If you believe in evolution, and you know, we may have people who don't watching, and that's okay. And that's why, if you wonder why does Jeremy often talk about evolution, say if you believe in evolution, that's why, because I don't want to offend anyone, right? Assuming you believe in evolution, our body ended up where we are with systems to repair injuries because we need them. We're not as prolific of breeders as, say, fruit flies that don't need systems like that. They just propagate a whole bunch. Right? So the loss of one isn't a big deal. The loss of one human being is a much bigger deal, biologically speaking. So we've got to repair our damage. We've got systems to do that. So let's say you have an injured foot. What do you do? I would, if I had a typical martial arts injury. Now I have to preface this by saying, I'm not a doctor. I'm not any kind of medical professional. You are not allowed to take any of my advice. This is just what I do, and if you follow my advice and you hurt yourself or something's wrong, you can't sue me because I didn't tell you to do it, right? If I hurt myself in class, there's a good chance that I would, maybe roll an ankle or jam a toe or maybe just overextended and my foot's really fatigued and it spasms. What would I do? If I can't work through it, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to take the weight off of it, but I'm going to move it. If it's an ankle, I'm going to circle my ankle. If it's toes, I'm going to wiggle my toes. If it's the arch of my foot, I'm going to think about picking up a tennis ball in the middle of my foot. That action where I'm doing this, right? Most of us can do this. Think about scrunching up in a shoe, this thing. And I'm going to do that gently and frequently. I'm going to make sure I drink a ton of water. I'm going to eat the foods that I know create the least inflammation in my body, because if your body has a certain amount of a system to fight off an injury, I've mentioned on the show before, peanut butter is inflammatory for me. My body is not a big fan of legumes. Peanuts are a legume, right? A bean. If I'm trying to deal with an injury and then I add something that my body thinks is mildly toxic for me, it's going to devote some of its resources to that. It's not going to spend 100% of what it can on repairing the injury in my foot. So I'm going to try to avoid that. I'm going to eat the foods that I know make me feel good. I'm going to get plenty of sunlight. I'm going to do things that make me happy. I'm going to move as much as I can with it, and if that means I can't walk on it yet, that's fine. But once I can, I'm going to make gentle steps. If that means I have to put on a shoe temporarily to soften the force, so it's not my full weight, so the shoe takes up some of it, that's a great time to use a shoe. But as soon as I can get away with not wearing that shoe and wearing, say, less of a shoe or no shoe, I'm going to do that. I'm going to spend time standing in place on that foot and moving around. Maybe my feet are in place, but I'm shifting my balance. And if you do that in a intentional way, it's going to heal a lot faster. How many times have you seen, let's see, for any of you who have dogs, you ever seen your dog come back from running around with a limp? What does the dog do? The dog limps. As soon as the dog can, it's putting its foot down. It's using it. How long does that limp usually last? Oh, the dog was limping yesterday. It's fine today. In the wild, if an animal needed to have every injury dealt with by a doctor, we wouldn't have any animals. Our bodies are far more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. Interesting discussion today. I didn't think we were going to go here, but I like it. I wish we trusted nature more. I've talked a little bit about some of the writing that I've done, and at some point I'll get back to this, and there will, we'll. This might not even be a whistlekick book, but just this idea that we can't outscience nature. I don't care what we do. Nature is far too complex. The human body is far too complex. We barely understand it. And so to say, hey, we know exactly how to make this better, there are consequences. Doesn't mean that you can't have a positive impact, but to suggest that we understand the full system and that there aren't consequences, it's silly. Take a look at how many people die every year from anti-inflammatories, over-the-counter Tylenol, ibuprofen stuff. Something that we think is so completely safe. Not saying I don't use it. With the tooth stuff I got going on, I've taken some ibuprofen. It's been really helpful. I'm glad I've had it. But it doesn't mean I'm going to take it chronically. I've heard people refer to ibuprofen as vitamin I. Ugh. If you are that hurt after every class, you're doing something wrong. Time to address it, because it's just going to get worse. You're just masking the symptoms. You're doing nothing to correct the root cause. People who train with shoes on, you're missing out on an opportunity. I'm not going to say you're asking for trouble, but you are missing out on an opportunity. One of the few socially acceptable times to be barefoot. I'm going to go. Good stuff today. Thank you to Frank. Thank you to John for chiming in with some questions in the chat. And thank you to all of you for watching. I will see you back here tomorrow. If you've got an inkling to support us, don't forget we've got a Patreon. Don't forget we've got a store at whistlekick.com. And if you use the code podcast15, you're going to get 15% off. And don't forget that we're here every weekday morning, 6:30 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Or you can catch it later to watch on YouTube, or catch it as a podcast in your podcast feed. Whatever works for you. Hit that thumbs up button, subscribe if you haven't yet. And I'll see you back here tomorrow. Take care, everybody. Peace.